Hugh Roland is remembered as one of the most uncompromising, daring, and fearless drivers ever featured on ice road truckers. He built his reputation through sheer grit, strength, and survival in some of the most dangerous and punishing conditions on Earth. But while his on-screen persona was larger than life, his personal journey off-camera was far from smooth. After a near-fatal accident and a string of legal battles, his name became wrapped in controversy. And those weren't the only issues. For years, whispers followed him, stories and warnings that many ignored until they became impossible to silence. This raises the question, was Hugh really the hero his fans believed him to be, or was there a darker side to his story? To truly understand, we have to ask, who is Hugh Roland? Even if you weren't a diehard fan of Ice Road Truckers, which first aired in 2007, chances are you still remember his name. Hugh Roland was a standout character whose presence lingered long after the credits rolled. Fans and fellow drivers nicknamed him the Polar Bear. Why? Because unlike many truckers on the show, Hugh was already a legend in his own right. He was tough, gruff, and utterly fearless, seemingly built for the punishing cold. He embodied exactly what viewers expected from someone bold enough to drive massive rigs across frozen lakes. His rising fame left audiences curious about the man behind the camera. Roland's story begins in Kelowna, British Columbia, in the community of Winfield. Long before television spotlight found him, Hugh had carved out a reputation as one of the most skilled and seasoned drivers on Canada's dangerous ice roads. With over 2 decades of experience navigating frozen terrain, he had already earned his nickname the Polar Bear, in places where most saw only thin ice, biting winds and death lurking beneath the surface. Hugh saw just another day of work. That toughness, mixed with his raw authenticity, made him incredibly endearing to fans. When Ice Road Truckers premiered in 2007, Hugh wasn't just a hired driver for the History Channel. He was already a business owner. He ran his own company, R&R Home Service, operating for rigs. He personally drove one while hiring 3 others, Todd White, Rick Yem, and Drew Sherwood, to handle the rest. This dynamic instantly added tension to Season 1. Unlike other solo drivers, Roland carried the additional pressure of managing employees, maintaining multiple trucks, and ensuring everyone survived the brutal crossings. But on the ice, things rarely went smoothly. Trouble soon erupted within his team. Todd White, one of his rookies, was fired early on. His problem? Excessive speeding. On an ice road, speeding is a death sentence. One wrong move could send a fully loaded rig plunging through thin ice into freezing waters. Hugh, known for his strict, no-nonsense attitude, refused to tolerate such reckless behavior. To him, the risk wasn't worth it, and Todd had to go. Then came Rick Yem, hot-tempered, outspoken, and a poor match for Roland's equally gruff personality. Rick constantly complained about the truck's poor condition, leading to fiery arguments that ended with him quitting mid-season. Drew Sherwood, Hugh's third hire, fared no better. Plagued by mechanical breakdowns, grew frustrated, and eventually walked away before Season 1 even ended. By the time the first season wrapped, Hugh was back to square one, just himself and his truck against the Arctic roads. This collapse within his team highlighted not only the brutal conditions of the job, but also the near-impossible challenge of managing and under such crushing pressure. So why does Hugh Roland's story matter so much? Because he was more than just a reality TV personality, he was the real deal. Long before Ice Road Truckers introduced global audiences to the dangers of frozen highways, Hugh was living it every single day. His Polar Bear, nickname wasn't for show, was earned through decades of surviving life-or-death conditions where one mistake could shatter the ice beneath his wheels. Looking back now, it's hard not to wonder were the conflicts, truck failures, and relentless danger in Season 1 foreshadowing something greater about Hugh's fate. Ice Road Truckers became an instant hit when it debuted in 2007, captivating fans who loved raw, high-stakes trucking, and Hugh Roland was its breakout star. His unmatched driving skills, competitive spirit, and undeniable charisma made him the centerpiece of the series' early seasons. He wasn't just another trucker trying to prove himself. He was already the embodiment of the ice road's brutal spirit. For weeks, He showcased fearless determination, never backing down from risks or rivals. Many fans even saw him as the trucker to beat the one whose very presence raised the stakes. But cracks were already forming beneath the show's polished exterior. Even in Season 1, several original drivers suddenly disappeared from the lineup, sparking fan speculation online. For a brand new series, losing so many drivers so quickly was more than a dit was alarming. Behind the cameras, tensions brewed. Some drivers disliked the constant filming schedule, while others felt that their once underground world of trucking was being overexposed, commercialized, and cheapened. The camaraderie that had once defined their work was slowly being replaced by competition for airtime. And fame, at the center of it all, was Hugh Rowland. His fiery personality made him both a fan favorite and a source of friction. He never held back his opinions, and his hunger for victory clashed with the more laid-back drivers. Heated arguments and disagreements became common both on and off camera. While reality TV thrives on drama, these tensions were all too real. Gradually, drivers began walking away, leaving Hugh increasingly isolated. What had once been his dream began to feel like a burden. With cameras always rolling, fans constantly watching, and expectations mounting, his passion turned into an exhausting grind. Then came the night of the accident, the turning point. In 2014, Hugh was involved in a devastating crash during a race that was supposed to cement his dominance. The accident shocked both his peers and his millions of fans who had seen him as nearly invincible. Though he survived, the crash left lasting physical and emotional scars. His once powerful truck was destroyed, and his legendary confidence was shaken. On the ice roads, hesitation meant defeat, and for Hugh, the crash was not just a setback, but the unraveling of everything he had built. The man once known as fearless was suddenly vulnerable. Fans watched in disbelief as their hero struggled to reclaim his footing while the show slowly moved on without him. By the time Hugh left the screen, his legacy was complicated. Some remembered him as a trailblazer and one of the show's original stars. Others saw his story as a cautionary tale of how fame, pressure, and tragedy can quickly turn a hero's rise into a downfall. The darkest chapter came with the lawsuit. In 2014, the beloved polar bear wasn't behind the wheel during his crash. He was a passenger in a pickup truck driven by one of the show's producers, Will Morrison. According to Hugh's lawsuit, Morrison drove recklessly, lost control, and veered off the road into trees and bushes. The crash caused severe injuries to Hugh's lower body, effectively ending his ability to drive safely or operate his trucking business. This wasn't just a physical blow, it destroyed his livelihood. Hugh sued, claiming the injuries left him unable to haul loads or drive trucks, ending a 2-decade career in one of the world's most dangerous professions. His lawsuit wasn't limited to his career. He insisted that his injuries also devastated his marriage, making intimacy painful and straining his relationship with his wife. Reports revealed the lawsuit included claims of negligence, breach of contract, and loss of consortium, legal term for the loss of companionship and marital intimacy. These were deeply personal struggles, not just professional ones. By 2015, Hugh's absence in Season 9 of Ice Road Truckers was unmistakable. Fans knew the truth. He was too injured to return. His departure marked a major turning point for the series. Without him, the competitive dash for the cash element faded, replaced by safer routes and community deliveries. Hugh's larger-than-life presence was gone, and with it, an era of danger and raw grit that had defined the show's early years came to a close. For Hugh Roland, life after the accident was a shadow of what it once had been. The crash had not only ended his trucking career, but also forced him to confront painful changes in his identity. For decades, he had defined himself by his ability to conquer the harshest roads in the world. Behind the wheel, he wasn't just another driver, he was the polar bear, the man who turned danger into routine. But stripped of that role, Hugh found himself struggling to adjust to a reality where he was no longer in control of his fate. The physical injuries alone were severe. According to the lawsuit, the damage to his lower body left him with permanent limitations. Walking became difficult. Long drives were out of the question. And the extreme physical endurance required for ice road trucking was no longer possible. But beyond the physical pain, the emotional toll was even heavier. Trucking wasn't just a job, it was Hughes's identity, his independence, and his legacy. Without it, he felt cornered. The lawsuit revealed a deeply personal side to his struggles. Hugh openly claimed that the accident had affected his marriage in ways few could have imagined. The injuries created challenges that extended into his most private life, straining his bond with his wife. By including claims of loss of consortium, he made it clear that the crash didn't just end his career, it disrupted the very foundation of his home life. Hugh's absence left a void that ice road truckers could never quite fill. He had been more than a driver, he was the show's energy, its grit, and its central figure. Without him, producers shifted the focus of the series. Instead of the high-stakes, cutthroat competitions for the cash that had defined the early seasons, later episodes leaned more on community deliveries, shorter trips, and safer routes. It was still dramatic, but the edge wasn't the same. For many fans, the change was obvious. The show no longer carried the same raw danger, the heart-in-your-throat suspense, or the intense rivalries that had hooked viewers from the start. Hugh's larger-than-life presence had carried the series in its most successful years. And once he was gone, the spirit of the show felt different. Viewers respected the drivers who remained, but the void left by the polar bear was impossible to ignore. So how should we remember Hugh Rowland? To some, he will always be one of the greatest drivers to ever appear on Ice Road Truckers, a man with unmatched toughness and fearless determination. His reputation as the polar bear wasn't created for television. It was earned through decades of risking his life on thin ice, driving heavy rigs where most men wouldn't dare go. He represented the raw authenticity of ice road trucking before fame and cameras complicated it all to others. Hugh's story is a cautionary tale. It shows how quickly success can be undone by fame, by tension, by tragedy. His rise to the top was meteoric, but his fall was just as swift. The accident that ended his career also stripped away his sense of invincibility, leaving him exposed to struggles that were painfully human. Even so, his impact is undeniable. For many fans, Hugh Roland was the reason they tuned in every week. He gave Ice Road Truckers its identity in the beginning and set the bar for what the show would become. Even now, years after his departure, discussions about the series often circle back to him, his grit, his clashes, his risks, and his downfall, the crash that changed everything in Ice Road Truckers, mattered deeply, not just to the show's loyal fans, but to anyone who had followed Hugh Roland's journey on screen. For viewers, Roland had grown into far more than a TV personality. He had become the face of Ice Road Trucking itself, the symbol of grit and survival on treacherous frozen highways. The series had long been built on glamorizing adrenaline, the tension of one wrong move and you're under the ice, but Roland's accident stripped away that glamour. It forced everyone, audiences and producers alike, to confront the real, devastating costs behind the dramatic footage. This crash wasn't some clever plot twist written into a script. It was a wake-up call that reminded us these drivers weren't actors playing roles. They were real professionals risking their lives every day for both the job and the show. One of the most striking things about Roland's lawsuit was not just in the details, but in what remained unsaid. Reality television thrives on danger, spectacle, and cliffhangers, but this time, none of it was staged. When a so-called reality show leads to a very real lawsuit, it highlights just how fragile the line is between entertainment and endangerment. Roland's claim went far beyond the loss of a career. He alleged the crash had destroyed his intimacy, strained his marriage, and shattered his personal life. That reminder was heavy. The men and women driving these massive rigs weren't simply characters on TV. They were human beings with families, relationships, and fragile lives that couldn't simply be glossed over for the sake of ratings. Looking back, Roland's crash served as a bold warning, proof that even the toughest figures are not invincible. Roland himself had always been seen as gritty, fearless, and widely respected. Yet in one moment, off camera, everything he built unraveled. The show didn't warn us about Roland through flashy stunts or dramatic narration. Instead, the warning came through raw truth. His crash wasn't part of a storyline. It was his actual life. And his lawsuit wasn't for show. It was a cry for accountability and a public record of consequences behind what millions of people had mistaken for harmless TV thrills. But how exactly had the show tried to warn us before? The truth is, the warnings were always there, hidden in plain sight. From its first episode in 2007, Ice Road Truckers made it clear that these roads weren't sets, and the people on screen weren't actors. The series put us right onto the winter road, out of Yellowknife, hundreds of miles of seasonal ice cut across frozen lakes, where a single mistake could cost a life. The backdrops we saw weren't just beautiful scenery. They were warning labels, the breathtaking drone shots, the roar of engines, and the suspenseful editing entertained us, but behind them lay sobering lessons about risk, exhaustion, and consequences. From the very first season, the red flags were there if we looked closely. Roland, a 20-year veteran based out of Kelowna Winfield, British Columbia, entered the show already a boss. He owned R&R Home Service, ran for trucks, and had 3 drivers working under him. On paper, that looked like confidence and scale. On screen, it became a rolling case study in how unforgiving the ice could be. By the end of that first season, all 3 of Roland's hired drivers had left the ice road. That wasn't ordinary turnover. It was a giant flare in the night sky. Everyone left for good reasons, and in hindsight, it raises the question, did they already recognize the danger and simply decide the risks weren't worth it? Most scenes from those early episodes were packed with adrenaline, but if you watched carefully, patterns emerged. Drivers constantly sped across ice, safety equipment was often disputed, and machines broke down in conditions where help was hours away. The show was essentially documenting human, mechanical, and operational stress fractures in real time. Those departures from Roland's crew weren't side plots. They were warnings that the margin for error was razor thin. Reality TV usually compresses experiences into dramatic beats. But in Ice Road Truckers, the editing sometimes turned near misses into cliffhangers and personal conflicts into colorful story arcs. That may have worked for storytelling, but the underlying facts were alarming. 3 drivers quitting, a damaged fleet, and a finale marked by a collision. Those were giant warning lights flashing about risk management, maintenance, and the psychological toll of working on roads that literally disappeared with the season. Another warning that slipped by most fans came later: Roland's slow fade from the series. Over time, as the show expanded to new roads and introduced new faces, the polar bear wasn't front and center anymore. For years, television trained us to accept cast rotations, so many didn't question his absence. But looking back, Roland's quiet retreat from the spotlight was its own warning. Why would a veteran who had come to embody toughness and danger start to fade away from the rhythm of the show? The answer should have made us ask what the grind was doing to even the hardest drivers. Season after season, they were leaving. Yet we didn't stop to reflect. We kept watching, entertained by the spectacle, blind to the warnings. Then came 2014, and the accident that nearly destroyed Roland's life. That single moment made everything clear. This wasn't just a TV game. It was real, it was brutal, and it carried consequences that couldn't be ignored. Roland's injuries were so severe that he was completely absent from Season 9 in 2015. His absence was felt deeply. He had been one of the stars who defined the rugged competitive energy of the show. When he was gone, so was much of that intensity. The producers, recognizing the dangers, shifted the show's focus. Instead of glorifying brutal competition, later episodes highlighted communities and shrinking safe ice roads. Roland's absence reshaped the way the series framed both risk and purpose. Looking back across the seasons, the warnings form a clear timeline. In Season 1, a boss driver was shown struggling against speeding dismissals, safety disputes, and machine failures ending in a collision. In later seasons, cast changes hinted at the slow wear of the job. And finally, off the ice road and between seasons, a crash ended Roland's TV career and forever changed his life. The show dramatized danger, yes, but it also documented truth. Sadly, many of us didn't absorb the weight until it was too late. Part of the reason may lie in how we consume reality. TV. We're conditioned to treat risk as spectacle background music. Countdowns, commercial breaks. If disaster doesn't happen in the moment, we assume danger has been conquered. But Ice Road Truckers was constantly showing us that consequences often come later. Drivers quit before making catastrophic mistakes. Crew members left because heaters failed in sub-zero cold. Veterans ended seasons in different trucks after collisions. And in Roland's case, he vanished entirely after a crash. All of these should have been seen as warnings, but we consumed them as episodes. The show revealed human limits in ways that few others did. It showed us how far a machine can be pushed before breaking, how much cold the human body can endure, and where the line between bravery and recklessness lies. Whether we recognize those warnings is another question. From the very first groan of ice beneath a truck, we could either lean forward in excitement or feel dread for the driver. Over and over, the show reminded us, these were not stunts. Season 1's exits, the lawsuit, and the silence of Season 9 all carried the same message.